The bright side of addiction is recovery. Welcome to Recovery Coast to Coast. In this edition, we are going to dip into the audio archive and capture a conversation with one of the NFL's legendary linebackers, who was as wild off the field as he was on the field. In fact, it nearly cost him his life, except for delicious divine intervention, a wonderful treatment program, exceptional treatment professionals, including the late great Dr. Joe Persh, and a lifetime program of 1 day at a time recovery. The life, the near death, and the recovery of Thomas Hollywood Henderson. I caught up with Thomas at an event that I was emceeing down in Austin, Texas, a number of years ago on the steps of the state capitol for the inaugural Big Texas Rally for Recovery. Here is a clip from that interview.
At the end of my career in Super Bowl 13, I had snorted cocaine without really grinding it. So I would snort rock, clunks, and so I tore the septum of my nasal passage, a hole in my septum. So by January of 79, this hole is a sore. And the only way to make it feel better was to put cocaine in it. So now I have to use cocaine in liquid form.
And we will close out the podcast with a New Year's greeting and a celebration of 47 years of recovery by one of the most amazing actors ever, 85-year-old Sir Anthony Hopkins, with a message. You won't want to miss it. Now, if you're in recovery or know someone or love someone who is, or simply want to know more about the recovery process, or maybe you're a bit concerned about someone you love, this is the podcast for you, as we carry the message of hope and the promise of recovery. And a reminder that you can find all of our podcasts at recoverycoasttocoast.org. I'm Neil Scott, host of Recovery Coast to Coast. Our website is recoverycoasttocoast.org. You'll find all of our podcasts available there. Following 15 years of nightly broadcasting on iHeartRadio in Seattle, we've now upgraded to a national podcast available to anyone at any time, featuring interviews with everyday people in long-term recovery, as well as clinicians and authors and recovering celebrities, newsmakers, people who offer the promise of hope and the reality of recovery. Plus, well-vetted resources for individuals, families, and friends. We invite you to enjoy it and to share it with your friends as well. Recovery is an American way of life. And a reminder that our email address is recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. We'd love to hear from you. Recovery Coast to Coast is supported by the good folks at Sundown M Ranch. They are one of America's oldest, least expensive, and most successful treatment programs. You know, it's important to understand that addiction is a chronic, debilitating, progressive disease that will only get worse as time goes on. Addiction treatment is not a guaranteed fix. You know, just like other chronic diseases, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, addiction can be successfully managed, assuming the individual follows the path prescribed and uses the tools provided. Successful treatment programs, including Sundown M Ranch in Yakima, Washington, will get you on the road to recovery. They will arrest the disease. They'll give you the tools necessary to manage your recovery, hopefully for the rest of your life. Now, the philosophy of treatment at Sundown is pretty simple. Arrest the disease, provide needed support in the recovery process, and help guide each individual back to a healthy and productive life. Now, because they are a nonprofit organization and they own their own land and offer successful treatment at a very low cost, in fact, it's one of the lowest costs for inpatient treatment in the country, they take most major insurance. And if you can't afford it, they have a compassionate staff. They will work with you to find ways to get you into recovery. They will also navigate the insurance labyrinth, which is not for the faint of heart. Now, once inpatient treatment is complete, they help you with the transition back into the community, providing a toolkit, if you will, that will keep you on the road to long-term recovery. Treatment at Sundown, 12-step centered. They provide detox, education, individual therapy, group therapy, an introduction to the self-help community, continuing care planning, and recovery enhancement. Now, if you're struggling with addiction, or maybe you know someone who's in trouble with alcohol or any other drug, do your research, but definitely check out Sundown. Their website is sundown.org. They're located just outside of Yakima, Washington, not far from Seattle. Sundown M Ranch, where recovery begins. You know, this is my favorite time of the podcast because it's time for coffee and conversation. Please join me as we go into the audio archives for an amazing interview that I did with a man who puts his recovery where his heart is. He's been sharing the gift of recovery for nearly 40 years, offering hope and the promise of recovery. So nice to have you with us. We are down here in Austin, Texas, the big Texas Rally for Recovery on the steps of the state capitol. It is so significant for people in recovery. We are over at the VIP reception that is being put on by TAP, the Texas Association of Addiction Professionals. Joining us in this segment is Thomas Hollywood Henderson, an absolute legend, of course, with the Dallas Cowboys. Thomas, how are you, my friend?
It's so nice to finally meet you. We've emailed, we've written, we've talked on the phone.
I know it.
And I'm so proud that you're doing what you're doing for the field. I hope you have 1 million listeners. It's just so nice to meet you. Thank you for recognizing the work I've done over the years. You know my good friend John Frederick.
Yeah, good man.
Who needs to get a lot of credit for putting on film little 35, 45-minute programs.
Many with Thomas Hollywood Henderson.
With Father Martin and others. And he's one of the legends who started putting it out there without some of us being ashamed to say that we're in recovery.
Take us back to 1983, November 8th. What happened that day?
I was in a clinic. I had just been arrested on the 3rd, and I was completely addicted to drugs. Anything you can think of, I was on. But on this particular time, it was crack cocaine in its purest form. And I lost my mind. I was psychotic. I was paranoid. I was crazy. My lawyer, who had just bailed me out of jail for assault charges, dropped me off at the care unit in Orange, California.
Joe Persh's place.
Joe Persh was my doctor.
Yeah.
So I had on the paper slippers. I was in a gown. They had me on Valium because when I came in, I was like a big red light flashing. I sat in this TV room for 2 days. They had a room for me, but I said, I'd rather just sit right here, and they kept feeding me Valium. The night of the 7th, my heart was so broken because this addiction had been a very private, secret thing as far as I could tell. But after I got arrested and was in the newspapers for doing something that was not me, I didn't recognize who that was. I remember thinking that I had embarrassed my mother. I had shamed my mother, and I lay back and wanted to die. God, I'm dead. I just want to be out of here. And I went to bed that night wanting to die, and I did. Because 27 years, 10 months, and 25 days later, almost 28 years, that guy that shamed his mother, his family, his friends, who had destroyed that portion of his life, does not exist anymore. So that's how I try to describe dying.
Addiction is certainly progressive in a negative sense, but just as addiction is progressive in a negative sense, recovery should be progressive in a positive sense. Talk about those 27 plus years for you, Thomas.
Well, for 7 months, I was in treatment. I was in primary care, I was in aftercare, I was in care, they care, somebody cared for 7 months. Then I pleaded no contest to what was going on with me legally.
Right.
So the lucky part of the Thomas Henderson story is that I went to prison 7 months clean.
Wow.
I went to prison with a program.
Wow.
I went to prison with a big book. I went to prison with a 12 and 12. Went to prison with a day at a time. When I talk to people about this, privately or publicly, because I was cracked up one night and shamed my mother. But the 28 months I spent in the California Department of Corrections was the best 28 months I'd had in a while.
What did you learn?
What did I learn? I learned that I was a man, because that is a atmosphere that really makes you be a man. I learned that I wanted to be clean. I learned that I was never going to return. I learned how to surrender to this self-imposed addiction that I put myself through. Part of the way I talk now, particularly with people who are on some of the newer medications, pill heads, people who are smoking crystal meth, crack, is that imagine this, that when you have that sweaty $20 bill that you've been holding on to for 15 or 20 minutes, and you're trying to go buy a fix, you're trying to go get some dope. So the question should be, when you get to the dope man, can I get $20 worth of screw up my life? Then I'll come back later for maybe $10 worth of screw up my life. And sometimes if I only have a 5, can I get some more of that screw up my life?
Thomas Hollywood Henderson joining us in a Recovery Coast to Coast. As we continue down here in Austin, Texas. Thomas has a couple of books out of Control and In Control. You are in control of your life now, aren't you?
I wrote In Control because in 2000 I won a $28 million lottery, which after taxes and splitting it ended up about $9 million.
Was that a blessing or a curse?
It was a blessing, because I was 16 years clean and I was able to handle it. The first thing I bought was a used car, which was, I didn't know it at the time, but it was like, oh, you're so sane. Boy, how the hell did this happen? There's a song in there. You're so sane.
Yeah.
I think this song is about you.
Wow. $28 million and maybe 8 or 9 after taxes. What happens to you when you get that?
Egotistically, it was for being such a great football player who never was really compensated for it. I was that good on the football field, but never got paid for it. And so I attributed it, the money. Mm-hmm. I finally got paid.
Well, didn't you win the lottery twice?
Well, I won a couple of small ones. I won a $5,000 one and a $2,500 one, but because it's Thomas Henderson, they report it. So now I get that all the time. Boy, what kind of luck? Dang, man. I can't win one.
But the real lottery you won was on November 8th, 1983.
The biggest.
Yeah.
And I have been very careful over these years because I've had a great sponsor. Chuck D is still the same sponsor I've had for all these years.
Nice.
And he's the kind of guy who'll call me up on my 25th. And before he says happy anniversary, he'll say, well, are you still sober? And then I think on my 20th, he called me and he said, boy, look here, this 20 years, huh? He says, unmarred by a single day of growth.
He sounds like a hell of a guy.
Oh, I love him.
And the gifts that you got from him as a sponsor, how do you give those gifts to people that you sponsor?
I'm brutal. I am brutal with the truth.
Yeah.
Families call me. I was on the phone the other night trying to assist in an intervention, and the mother was, doing her best. I just got brutal with them. Now, she didn't like what I was saying. She started crying. But the next day she called me back. She goes, you're the only person that's ever told me the truth about me.
Nice.
And she says, thank you. I work with counselors. I work with people who actually are paid substance abuse counselors who are still dealing with issues. And I am brutal I mean, I have one guy, for instance, who sent me a note the other day, and he wrote down the 10 worst things I've ever said to him. and he said, but it was all true. He said, but you hurt my feelings. You embarrassed me. I've worked with celebrities, and some I can talk about, some not. But one would be John Daly, because the golfer, after he won at Crooked Stick and won the British Open, he came to treat me. He asked me to work with. So he put me in the newspaper and told people that he'd worked with me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. About a month ago, I get a phone call from People magazine, because some people really love press. I happen to be not one of them anymore. I used to love it too. So this lady says, well, I'm doing this big article on John Daly. He told me to call you and that you would talk to me about him. I said, oh, he did. He did. I hung up the phone and I called John. I go, John, what is this? He said, well, do whatever you want to do. I gave her your name, and so, yeah, you have permission to talk about, I said, okay, talk to you later. So I called the lady back and I said, ma'am, I am not going to talk about my personal conversations.
Good for you.
About John Daly.
Good for you.
With or without his permission, I am not
Yeah.
speaking a word. Now, the one thing he wrote in his book, and I didn't even tell her that, but if anybody has ever read John Daly's book, he talks about being on a mountain in Palm Springs. So I am living here in Austin, and I'm his sponsor at the time, and all I could hear was the gunning of an engine. And he's relapsed, and he's going to drive off the mountain. I am asleep, 4 a.m. I hit my head on the ceiling fan above my bed, because now I understood what was going on. And I talked him off the mountain. It took me half an hour, but he's alive today. He wrote about that, so I can share about that.
Right. Wow.
But I talked him off the mountain. So. And like today, in Austin, Texas, in front of the state capitol, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about today. Whatever God decides the conversation is going to be. I'll tell you one funny one, though, that I'm probably not going to do it today because it's probably tasteless, but I'll do it on your radio show.
Yeah.
So I'm a little angry with all this new information that I'm finding out about this tragedy of Michael Jackson. And so I'm jealous. I'm jealous that of all the ways that I got high, and all the times that I went into emergency rooms and after NFL games and got a nice big old shot of Demerol. Based on I'm just in pain. I wasn't in pain. I just wanted a nice big shot of Demerol. I'm mad because it never occurred to me to have a saline bag and a rack next to my bed where I could have dope by drip. I'm mad.
Yeah.
How fun could that have been?
You never thought of that.
How much fun could that be? IV, kind of, I'm nuts, aren't I?
In a good way.
Yeah. And so here's another thought, because I'm a recovering addict. 10 years ago, they got medical marijuana. Now, marijuana is one of my favorite substances back when. They said, California, you could go get a prescription for medical marijuana. So in my drug addict mind, I wanted to move to California because I'm sure I could come up with a couple of symptoms. I play football, got a bad back, had to replace my knee. Doc, don't you see that little glaucoma in my eye?
Write a prescription.
Yeah. These are just what I'm just telling you. As healthy as we can get, we're always drug addicts.
In your playing days with the Cowboys, did you ever use during a game?
Not really. We took speed.
Yeah.
We took black mollies with black coffee, just to sort of get up and amped and ready to go. At the end of my career in Super Bowl 13, I had snorted cocaine without really grinding it. So I would snort rock, clunks, and so I tore the septum of my nasal passage, a hole. I mean, a hole in my septum. So by January of 79, this hole is a sore. And the only way to make it feel better was to put cocaine in it. Oh. So now I have to use cocaine in liquid form. So here I am, Dr. Einstein. I go get a Vicks inhaler, and empty it, squeeze it out, empty, squeeze it, empty, squeeze. And I would take cocaine and put water with the cocaine, and then I would, suck the cocaine into the inhaler for a mist. And that was the only way that because my nose was clogged, so I couldn't use the substance the way most would use it. Now I needed it in a water form. And so not for performance, but for treatment of my own nose in Super Bowl 13, I had a water-based cocaine inhaler in my during the game. So I'm not proud of that. I'm not waving a flag about that, but I was treating something that was giving me a migraine. If you can imagine having a completely abscessed sore in the middle of your nose.
You have been such a beacon of hope for so many people for so long, nearly 28 years. Today, you are here in Austin, your hometown, on the steps of the Capitol, standing up, speaking out, and telling people that recovery is a wonderful way of living.
And I'm actually glad that I was chosen for this.
I am too.
This is my hometown.
I know.
I've been around this place for 58 years. I, went away and went to college and did different things. It's an honor. I like what this organization is doing, so I'm going to start off with their talking point, because I don't want it to get confused with any traditions of 12-step programs.
Totally different.
See, I'm trying. So I'm going to walk that line today. That surprise people that you're struggling with depression. Surprise people that you're on medication, so they love you anyway.
Yeah.
I have a problem, and here's how I'm dealing with it. Because some of the people that I know in recovery take certain medications for depression and etc., who've been sober for a long time, got depressed. So I called Dr. Persh. And so I said, Doc, sometimes I don't go out of the house for a couple of days. I said, I play golf, and then I come home, and I close the doors and pull the shutters, and I get the remote, and I watch politics, and I don't go out. And I said, Dr. Persh, some of my friends are on depression medication. I said, Dr. Persh, do you think I'm depressed? He said, no, Thomas, you're retired. You're not getting any medication.
I don't want to take up any more of your time. There are people here at the reception who want to get to meet Thomas Hollywood Henderson. I am so delighted that we were finally able to meet after so many years, and you are truly a beacon of hope, and you epitomize what I have said my entire career of 30 years in this field. The bright side of addiction is recovery, and that's where you are.
Well, I also want to say to you this. There is no reason that I shouldn't come on a couple of times a month and have some fun.
Absolutely. We could have a lot of fun together. I know we could have a lot of fun.
Because I'm nuts. You know what I mean? And so we can really... Oh, and before we leave now, God bless him, I don't think he's doing so good these days, but Bob Earl used to be one of the great speakers.
Yes, indeed.
And he used to make everybody mad about coffee and nicotine.
I know it.
I quit smoking cigarettes in 1988. Had a granddaughter 13 years ago. A friend of mine gives me a box of Cuban cigars. I get addicted to cigars. So now I'm 5 months nicotine free. And you look like a cigar to me. Okay? I mean, I'm struggling. It's been a struggle.
One day at a time, Thomas. That's all you got to do.
That's all I do.
Don't smoke a cigar today, and you're a winner.
Yes, I want us to have numbers because I want to come on your program from time to time.
You're welcome anytime.
Is this the first time?
We've tried to do it a number of times, and it hadn't worked out. But it takes what it takes, and here we are today.
I've got 9 films that are used
indeed.
in rehabs. Any of your listeners, go to YouTube. Go look on the Hollywood Henderson. I have one of my films on there. It's in 9 segments. It's called Yes, I'm Still Clean.
Nice.
I made that film because some drug addicts at a rehab sent me an email. And the question was, we just watched one of your old tapes, and we were wondering, are you still clean? So I made a damn film called Yes, I Am Still Clean. So that's for people to go look at. I am still going to make another film, but the work I'm working on now is I'm moving toward not only about my addiction, I'm going to start talking about nicotine. I'm going to make a film that's going to tie it all together, and I'm going to talk about nicotine because this was the worst detox and the worst recovery I've had from any of the substances that I've abused in my life. And so that means I have to talk about it.
Thank you so much for your time. We will talk again soon. You are always welcome on Recovery Coast to Coast.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that you've enjoyed my conversation with the Dallas Cowboys legend and a recovery legend as well, my friend Thomas Hollywood Henderson. And by the way, I want to remind listeners of this podcast, if you would like to tell your story of recovery, regardless of the path you've chosen, and as long as you have been in continuous recovery for a year or more, drop us a note at recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Now, Sir Anthony Hopkins embodies all the elements of long-term recovery. He is happy, joyous, and free, and has been for the last 47 years. He just celebrated his 47th recovery birthday with the new calendar year. He has a powerful message to share, which he will do in just 30 seconds.
She has always been your baby, but when your daughter got into drugs and alcohol, she turned into a stranger. What do you do? Where do you turn? Contact Sundown M Ranch. Sundown's nationally recognized youth treatment program guides young people back to a life free of drugs and alcohol. All treatment is gender-specific and directed by caring certified professionals in a safe environment. You can get your daughter back and get to know her again. Go to www.sundown.org to learn more.
And now, as promised, a message of hope, happiness, and long-term recovery from iconic 2-time Academy Award-winning actor Sir Anthony Hopkins.
Hello, everyone. I just want to wish everyone a Happy New Year. And also to say I'm celebrating 47 years today of sobriety. But this is a message not meant to be heavy, but I hope helpful. I am a recovering alcoholic. And to you out there, I know there are people struggling. In this day and age of cancel and hatred and non-compromise, children being bullied, I say to this, be kind to yourself. Be kind. Stay out of the circle of toxicity with people. If they offend you, live your life. Be proud of your life. 47 years ago, I was in a desperate situation, in despair, and probably not long to live. And I just happened to acknowledge one day that there was something really wrong with me. But I didn't realize that it was a kind of condition, mental, physical, emotional condition called alcoholism or addiction. I'm not an expert on drugs. I'm not an expert on anything. I know nothing, except I have found a life where no one bullies me. I want to say to all you young people who are being bullied, take heed. You be proud of yourself. Don't listen to them. Don't let yourself be put down. Depression is part of being alive, sometimes an anxiety. Life is tough. But if you need help with any addiction or problem, talk to someone. Talk to someone you respect. Whether it's a counselor or to go to a 12-step program. There are 12-step programs all over the world. Every city, every small city, every community. 12-step programs that can help you identify what you are. It doesn't cost a thing, but it will give you a whole new life. I'm not a do-gooder, or, I'm an old sinner like everyone, but all I can say is I have the best life I can even imagine, and I can't even take credit for it. So wherever you are, get help. Don't be ashamed. Be proud of yourselves. Whatever you do, don't let anyone put you down. Don't let anyone put you down. If you're going to be angry at that. Don't let anyone put you down. Celebrate yourself, as I do myself, although I know nothing. Lots of love to you all. Thank you.
Well, that wraps up this edition of the national podcast, Recovery Coast to Coast. If you've enjoyed our podcast, please share it with others via social media or simply by telling someone about it. You can find all of our podcasts at recoverycoasttocoast.org. And again, if you'd like to get in touch with us, love to hear from you. Our email, recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Also, please hit the subscribe or follow button. It's free, and you'll be notified the next time we publish a podcast. And remember, if you know someone who is experiencing problems with alcohol or any other drug, here's that 24-hour national helpline that offers free information and confidential treatment referrals. Spanish-speaking individuals are available as well. It's 1-800-622-HELP. And join us next time for America's Voice for Recovery, Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. And another shout-out to our sponsoring organization, Sundown M Ranch, just outside of Yakima, Washington, where recovery begins. Sundown.org. I'm Neil Scott, reminding you to stay healthy, live in gratitude, and be kind to others. Remember, the bright side of addiction is recovery. Pass it on.